Welcome to Built to Go, a Vanlife podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Wagg, coming to you from the College of Curiosity. This time it's episode 302, and we're going to talk about unexpected places to shop for van life. Yeah, you're going to go to Home Depot to get your stuff, but wait, there's more. We're also going to talk about fuse taps, the proper way to get 12 volts out of your engine, and a product review of a magnetic rechargeable light that's actually pretty cool. Well, it can be cool or warm, depending on how you set it. But anyway, welcome back. We actually have a whole lot more to talk about here this week. I only have so much time during the intro to get to it all, but it's going to be packed, so I should probably stop prevaricating and actually do something here that is related to the episode, and yes, we shall do that right now. So, unexpected places to shop for your van life needs. And I'm talking about the entire build process. There's a lot of them out there, and depending on where you live, you just might not have had these things enter your radar. Like a few weeks ago, I talked about the Restore, which is a good place to find just odd bits of furniture and architectural elements that might fit your van build. But that's just one of many, many, many different places you should look. So I'm going to go down a list here, and this is entirely just to give you ideas of where to go. I'm not recommending any particular store or anything like that. It's just to give you an idea of where to look to find, say, a sink, for example. And one place to find a sink might be a restaurant supply store. Yeah, so these are places that supply restaurants. And if you have ever been in a restaurant kitchen, you will notice that it looks very, very different from the kitchen in your house. And that's because they have varied needs, and that means there's a lot of different ways to do things that you can find at a restaurant supply store. I especially like the chafing table stuff, which is, well, basically, a chafing table, there's other words for it, but it's a big, long stainless steel tray that has hot water in it, almost boiling water, and you put other trays in that water and it keeps things warm. If you've ever been on a buffet, for example, that's how they're keeping stuff warm usually. What matters is that you can get these stainless steel bowls and trays in a whole bunch of different sizes, and they're tough. They're really, really made well. And if you have an unusual place in your van where you want to put a sink, you can use one of these. You just have to drill your own hole to put the drain in, which is a little bit of a pain, but not impossible. And then you can have a very heavy-duty sink, maybe not for a lot of money. Some of these restaurant supply stores sell used stuff that's often very inexpensive. They also sell bulk food containers, cutting boards and shelving, very industrial grade stuff that might be more suitable to van life than the stuff you'd find at Home Depot, for example. So there are many, many examples, but Chef Store is one, Gordon Food Service is another, lots of independent suppliers. I know of at least 3 different places in Chicago alone. But make sure they're open to the public. Not all of them are, but many of them are. Another place to look for things, and this is where I'm focusing for some of my build of my pod, are marine supply stores. Now, West Marine, probably the most popular, just filed for bankruptcy protection, so I don't know how that's going to go. But online is also an option here, too. You're in a van, but maybe sometimes think boat, because people on boats have a lot of the same problems that people in vans do, and their stuff tends to be better quality, because if your van breaks down, you can step outside. If your boat breaks down, you're in serious trouble. So they actually try to make things much better. And 2 places I would look here are windows for like portholes and things like that. That's a great option for a van that is in the marine world. And also electrical. Their electrical is much more robust than the electrical you can find for most vans. It will cost more. That's the deal with boats. You know, a boat is a hole in the water into which you throw money. This is true. But if you want some high quality stuff, a marine supply store might have that one thing you need to make your build exactly the way you want. If you live in an urban area, you may not have encountered a farm and ranch store. I know I had never heard of these until I moved to rural Virginia, and there was a Tractor Supply nearby, and I was like, well, what do they sell at Tractor Supply? And as you might imagine, they sell supplies for tractors, but they also sell so much more, and they're just one example. There's Rural King and Fleet Farm and a whole bunch of other places like this, and they sell just everything you would need on a farm. And the thing is, on a farm, you need a lot of things, including unusual tools and fasteners and wires and things like that. If you want to go buy chain, for example, you can buy chain at Home Depot, but you will find a lot more options at a farm and ranch store. It's also a great place just to walk around to get ideas. If you're pulling a trailer, for example, they're a good place to get wheel bearings. If you go to Napa or whatever, they might have the wheel bearings you need, but Farm and Ranch will probably have them, as well as just tires and axles and things like that. So if you've never gone to one of these places and you happen to be driving around and you see one, I would recommend checking it out. I would put Northern Tool in that category too. Northern Tool is like Harbor Freight, only a little bit better quality and a little bit more leaning towards the farm world than Harbor Freight. But you can throw them in there too. That's all in the same bucket. Industrial suppliers. So industrial suppliers are suppliers to industry, and they sell some of the raw components that industry needs. But they sell some stuff that we need too, because sometimes what we need is the same things that industry needs, like wire looms for cable management and unusual fasteners and adhesives and switches. They are not always the cheapest, but they're often a good place if you need a lot of something. Like if you're going to use a lot of grommets for whatever, they would be a good place to look because they'd have a whole bunch of different sizes. They also sell weird things like edge protection. If you have a sharp edge on your counter and you want to cover that with something, an industrial supplier might have a solution that Home Depot or a kitchen supply place might not have. So some examples of that are McMaster and Carr, Fastenal, Grainger, etc. But don't overlook that. I have found them to be super useful for things like finding plugs to cover up holes. For example, in my ambulance, I had a whole bunch of holes from what used to be there that I took out, and I was able to find these white, hard plastic, basically stickers to cover the holes, and that actually looked pretty good in the end. Auto salvage yards. I mean, if you're driving an old rig, if you have an Econoline, for example, a classic example, make friends with your local auto salvage yard because they're going to have stuff that you're going to need, and it's going to be stuff that's getting harder and harder to find. So you might be able to find some new seats that are in a fairly good shape vehicle that was wrecked. Look for the window vans. They're probably going to be the ones with the best seats. Dome lights, switches, trim, stuff like that. And even like fun stuff like cup holders. In the Econoline, you have that doghouse there, and there have been all kinds of attachments made for that doghouse that make them look good. If you could find a conversion van in a junkyard, you could probably get some great stuff out of that. So don't overlook auto salvage yards. There are online versions, but in my experience, the best of these are the you-pick places where you basically just go wander through the junkyard with a wrench and take off whatever you want and then bring it back, and they'll charge you for it. I've done this in the past. It's a lot of fun. A little bit dangerous. It's definitely an adventure, and you definitely have to have the right mindset. But you can find all kinds of stuff. And don't forget that you don't have to use stuff from your vehicle. A lot of seats fit a lot of different vehicles or can be made to fit them. I remember back in the day that a lot of people used to get Volvo seats because they were so comfortable and then put them in whatever car they had. So you can do things like that too. Office supply stores, Staples, Office Depot, whatever is still left. These stores have gotten hit hard by the online shopping phenomenon, but they still exist out there, and I use them for things that I just can't think of finding anywhere else. And a lot of the stuff that they make for offices can be used in your van. For example, file folders that hang on the wall, those little in and out box things, those are actually super useful in a van. You can use them to hold manuals or magazines or cutting boards or anything like that. I have one next to my desk here in my studio that I use for clipboards because I now have a clipboard of every project I'm working on. And it's just great. I can just reach over and grab the clipboard, and it's perfect. And the van can be the same. So don't overlook those. And the nice thing about them is that if you're on the road, there's usually one in every city of any size. Like Peru, Illinois has one, and it's not the world's biggest place. And they're also a good source in rural places for computer supplies. If you need something for your computer, like a cable or a hard drive or stuff like that, they're probably going to be the best bet because we seem to have lost all our Fry's and Micro Centers and things like that. Fabric and upholstery suppliers. Yeah, this is a thing. Car companies and upfitters need to buy their stuff from somewhere, and they get them from fabric and upholstery suppliers. I know a lot of people ask me where I got my 4-way stretch carpet for the NV200, and I'm not going to give that link out anymore because it's been so long, I'm not even sure they're still in business. But you can just Google fabric and upholstery supplier and learn about that. And they sell things that you just can't get anywhere else, like rolls of vinyl and durable fabrics that are waterproof, fabrics that can resist stains. They sell curtain tracks. If you want to put a curtain and you want to bend it, you can get the right kind of track there. Snaps, grommets, webbing, hook and loop material, all that kind of stuff. And materials for cushions and window coverings. If you're a handy person with a sewing machine, you can get the right materials here to make your own cushions or whatever. So don't forget about those. Here's an interesting one, and I have a product that I buy specifically from these that I love, and that is medical and home care stores. So one of the problems that people who are having health issues have, that is also a van life problem, is staying clean. If you're bedridden, you can't just hop up and go to the shower all the time. And so there's lots of solutions for this. The thing I use are these washcloths from Stryker. Now, Stryker is a medical company that makes things like bone saws and stretchers, but they also sell these washcloths exactly designed for giving somebody a bath when they can't get to a bath. I love these things. I bought an entire case of them. I think they're wonderful. And that's you will get these at a medical and home care store. They also sell things like, urinals and other kind of privacy products, they call them, and bedside organizers, and all these things that try to make life easier for people who are having health issues. And it's funny how often those things carry over into van life, because there are different ways to do things we do in a house, and sometimes that's exactly what you need in your van. This one is better known, and that's the military surplus stores. I love military surplus stores, and it was interesting because in the 70s they were full of all kinds of interesting stuff, and then the 80s it kind of petered out, and then in the 90s it was mostly just stuff they made themselves. It's like, well, we don't have any military surplus anymore, so we're going to have to just put other stuff in there. And then now they're getting more and more military surplus stuff. You can think what you'd like about that. But they have interesting and usually rugged things that can be good for van life. My complaint about military surplus stores regarding van life is that military stuff tends to be heavy, and that's usually not something you want in a van. But they will often have things that are just really cool that would be great for van life. For example, I've been looking at a lot of the military desks. So, when they go set up somewhere, they need desks. They have clerks and accountants, and they need to sit at desks, and they have all these portable desk solutions that I don't know, I think it would be kind of cool to put one of those in a van, or at least carry it around so you can set it up outside. So military surplus stores, not what they were in their heyday, but still an interesting place to go. And so overall, don't think, I have to go to Home Depot. Think about what you want, where you've seen it, and where the person who made that would have gotten it from. There are stores all over serving not consumers. And if you can get access to those, you can find some really cool stuff for your vans. For example, if you happen to be in Indiana, you've got all kinds of RV supply stores there that probably aren't publicly advertised. But if you can get access to those, you can get all the stuff that the RV makers do. And, well, then you might end up having the same quality as an RV. And, well, let's not go there right now. And thank you to Stefan, because he bought me a gallon at buymeacoffee.com/built-to-go. That's 2 T's, not 3, not 1. If you would like to help keep ads off this podcast, please visit buymeacoffee.com/built-to-go, and you can buy me a gallon or two of whatever you would like, and that will help us out here. Special thank you to the folks who do this every single month, and let us proceed. Reader comments. So last week generated enough comments that I think I need to address some of them. So first, the one that doesn't surprise me is the insulation thing. And I've made my argument about insulation, okay? There's nothing really more for me to say about that. You can agree or disagree, that is fine. But I've made my argument. And that argument is simply that people spend way too much time worrying about insulation, and that if you're living in your van where the temperature inside your van will change according to the weather, meaning that it will get hot when it's hot out and cold when it's cold out, you're probably better off not having a lot of insulation unless you're always going to keep it the temperature you want. That's my basic argument. However, somebody pointed out that my argument is for vans and not necessarily for other vehicles. They have a minibus. And for them, they find that it's actually much more difficult to heat it up in the winter. So insulation's much more important to them. And I think that is actually correct. All this stuff depends on your situation. And so while in my little pod, a 2 kilowatt diesel heater is way more than enough to get that thing toasty. In a minibus, well, suddenly you've got a different problem. You've got exponentially more air, and then it's made of steel, which is a thermal bridge. And if that steel's not covered, it's going to take that heat and just send it outside. And she says she had a 5 kilowatt diesel heater, and it wasn't enough to heat the inside of her rig. So yes, that is probably a good scenario for adding more insulation, especially with all those windows. I mean, if you think about it, so I should have added that insulation does depend largely on your circumstances and the size of your vehicle. Smaller spaces are easier to heat and cool just because there's less to heat and cool. That's pretty obvious. So if you're in a bigger rig, do your own math and figure out what's best for you. But don't stress about the insulation so much. And that leads us to another comment that I thought was actually pretty clever. Longtime Discord member Repro said, you missed the obvious overrated thing, the van itself. And you know, he's right. And to explain this, Vanlife isn't about the van. It's about the lifestyle, or the ability to be free and travel where you want to and sleep where you want to. You don't need a van for that. You just need a way to travel. People do this on bicycles. People do this with backpacks. It's all related. And so while we focus on vans, because that is where this all started for me and us and all this, it doesn't have to be a van. Car camping is getting more popular. It's partially because vans are hard to get in the U.S. and there's so few to choose from. SUV camping is a huge thing. You know, a lot of call that overlanding, which is really just another form of van life in my way of thinking about it. Schoolies, you know, school buses, van life, it's all the same thing to me. But so yeah, if you're thinking about doing van life, take a step back and think, is the van the thing or is it the life that's the thing? Because this can work with just about anything. So thank you for that, Repro. Van life news. 2 things, a bad thing and I think a good thing. So the bad thing is Crossroads, the app that I've talked about before and that we were using at VanFest last year, is folding at the end of July, and I'm very sad to hear this. It is very, very difficult to create a new social platform, and these guys really, they got so much of it right, and then there were these obstacles and hurdles that just didn't make it work, and then finally they're running out of money, and they were paying for this out of their own pockets and stuff. So there's a chance it could be saved if they can get some grant money, or if some kind person comes along and says, you know, I want this to work, let's throw some money behind it. But sadly, at the end of July, they're going to shut it down. They've promised not to sell anyone's data. They're simply going to delete everything if they can't find a way to keep it going. And I've put a link in the show notes if you want to read or actually watch what they said. It's at their Instagram account, which I have linked in the show notes. And I could not view this without having an Instagram account. I actually had to create an Instagram account to read this, which annoys me, but that's how Instagram is. So thanks, guys, for giving it a shot. I appreciate it. I thought you had a great idea. And for European folks, I have some good news. Starlink has changed its roaming policies. It's much more like the U.S. now. Starlink is well known for changing their policies on a whim. You know, it's one of these "pray I don't change it again" kind of deals with them. And you know, I signed up for $50 a month plan, and in a week they raised it to $55. So hey, great! I'm glad we had that agreement going. But anyway, Starlink is really the best game in town for mobile internet, and now it's easier. And they have a European roaming plan now that includes a massive list of countries where it's the same no matter what country you're using it in. You know, if you're in Estonia, and next week you're in Spain, it's the same. And you're going to have to do your own research on whether your country applies and where you can go and stuff. I'm just announcing that it's a thing now. It's kind of like it has been in the U.S., which the U.S. is kind of weird. Like, if you have the roaming plan in the U.S., you can go anywhere in the U.S. and use it. And that includes, like, Guam and Puerto Rico, which are places that have different geography than the rest of the country. So what actually is the restriction here? It's not like it's a geographic restriction. At that point, it's a political restriction, right? I mean, if you're in the Mariana Islands and you fly to New York and you bring your Starlink and you can pay the same price in both places, they're on opposite ends of the world. So I don't quite understand that, but heck, that is the way it is. Some things are not meant for mortal men such as we, and so I will just say, hey, go to the link in the show notes. Just go to starlink.com, and you probably can find the link for it. It's under Starlink support in there. But yeah, I think this is a good thing for folks in Europe. I think Starlink is going to be a lot easier to use for those folks on a roaming plan there. And for folks in the U.S., the plan I have is not the roaming plan because I do not roam with my Starlink. I haven't found it necessary. I have my Starlink set up in my Tiki Bago land property in LaSalle County, Illinois. And I am paying $55 a month flat with no hardware costs, and it's an unlimited plan. I think that's a bargain. It's actually cheaper than the 10 megabit per second DSL. That's the only other option I have. What I'm learning, though, is that deal is only available in some places. Like, I don't know why in LaSalle County, Illinois, it's only $55, but apparently if you go to other places, it's a lot more. So the whole thing is mysterious to me, how their pricing works and how geography relates and capacity and all that. I know they have an algorithm and they're working on it, but I do not pretend to understand it. Tech Talk. Let's talk about fuse taps. So we talk a lot about how to wire things in the back of the van, but let's say that you have an older van and you want to put some USB ports in your dashboard, which I'm actually doing in my truck right now. There was a USB port in the dash. It's a 2019 Ram 1500 Classic, and it was the low power kind, and honestly, I just found out it's not even connected. When I got the thing, it didn't work. And I had CarMax, who I bought it from, fix it, and they said they fixed it, but they didn't. It never worked. And now I know they didn't fix it because it was never hooked up from the factory. I was digging around the dashboard and actually found the plug that goes from the radio to the aux port, because that's where it gets its power from. And it was still wrapped up in its original plastic. It had never, ever, ever been plugged in. And of course, now it doesn't matter because I've replaced the radio. So I'm ripping the thing out. I'm going to put a PD, a power delivery USB port in there. But then I have the question, where do I get power from for that? Because I can't use the original power because that came from a radio that's not in there anymore. Now, I've been doing this for literally 40 years at this point. I know where to get the power from. You get it from the fuse block. But the way you get it is kind of important. So they sell these things called fuse taps. That's the word. That's the word you can Google. You have to figure out what kind of fuses you have in your vehicle. Now, if you have a vehicle like mine, you've got like 30 different kinds of fuses. But you want to find a circuit that is safe to add something to and that is on when you want it to be on. For example, in the fuse block, you will have fuses that are hot all the time. Whatever fuses lead to the dome light, for example, that's hot all the time. It doesn't matter if you have the key or not. If you open the door, the dome light comes on. So that circuit is always hot. And then you have circuits that only work when ignition is on or in the auxiliary position. Different vehicles do that a little bit differently. There are some that are literally only on when the engine is running and your ignition is in the on position. There are others that will run in aux. Most of them that run in aux will also run in on. I've never seen one that was the opposite of that. And nearly all of them that run while you're in the on position will also work in aux. But not all of them. Like windshield wipers typically don't work when you're in the aux position. The point of all that is you need to find the right circuit to use for whatever you want. So when I'm installing my USB port in the dashboard, do I want it to turn off with the key or do I want it to work all the time? The risk here is that if it works all the time and I leave like my Jackery plugged into it or something, that could drain my battery and I couldn't start the thing. And I don't like that idea. So what I recommend is installing it onto a switched circuit, something that only works in aux. And then you have to find something that's like that. Like, what is like that? And hey, maybe that's the windshield wipers. That's a whole other discussion, picking which circuit. What I want to talk about here today is the fuse taps. So let's say you find the circuit you want. Let's say you're going to use the windshield wipers. Find the fuse in the fuse block, which is usually under the dashboard. In my truck, it happens to be under the hood, which I find very inconvenient. And then find that fuse. And that'll be in your owner's manual, or you can use Google or whatever. Often there are 30, 40, 50, even 100 different fuses, so finding it can be difficult. Figure out what amperage it is, and then buy a fuse tap that will fit that fuse. You can find them on Amazon or whatever. Don't get the cheapest ones. It's probably a good idea to get one that is fairly good quality because you're dealing with electrical stuff here. So you'll remove the existing fuse, but don't throw it away. You're going to use it again. You will insert it into the fuse tap because your fuse tap has 2 sockets for fuses. One for the original fuse and one for the fuse that you're going to be adding for whatever USB port or whatever you're adding. Make sure you put it in the right slot. It will be pretty obvious if you look at it. You don't want to mix up the fuses here. And then get the fuse that is the right size for the wiring of whatever you're putting in and put that in the other slot. And then there'll be this plastic part that kind of looks like a fuse with a wire coming off of it. That's what plugs back into the fuse block. And you basically have this cable dangling with 2 fuses on it. One of them basically is the original fuse, and then the other one has a wire coming off of it, and that's what you will power whatever you're using with. It's actually fairly simple once you see it. It's a little hard to describe via voice, but this is the proper way to get 12 volts from your engine, unless you have a van that has an outfitter's port where there's actually 12 volt you can tap off of. In my Sprinter, that was the case. Underneath the driver's seat, there were ports especially for this. They were basically terminals. You can put whatever you wanted on there. That is very nice, but not every vehicle has that, and my truck certainly doesn't have that. So the basic concept here is that if you want to take power from your vehicle and put it into the dashboard, the proper way to do it is with a fuse tap, and that's the terminology you should use when you're researching this. You're going to have to find the right circuit and the right size fuse, etc. But it's not that hard. You don't have to cut any wires except for the ones that you're installing. You just have to crimp a couple of things, and then you will have a good, reliable source, and it will not affect the electrics of the engine. That's the point of all this. If you overload whatever you put in, you're going to blow the fuse for that thing, not the fuse for whatever you're taking from the engine. So your windshield wiper fuse will be fine no matter what you do with your USB port. It's a good thing. Check it out. And now that I finished this, I'm realizing this would be a much better video than a podcast segment. Oh, and one last note. This is going to be for fairly low amperage stuff. Like if you're putting more than a 20 amp fuse on there, this might not be the best way to go because the fuse block itself has a rating. So don't use this method for, like, say, battery to battery charging. For that, I would literally go battery to battery. Product review. The fine folks at LETOUR or LETOUR or LETOUR, however you would like to pronounce that, sent me a light. They sent me an email saying, hey, let's collaborate. And I was like, here's my deal. Send me the thing. Don't give me any restrictions, and I'll do a review of it. And, well, here I am with that review. So they actually sent me this thing. It's a magnetic rechargeable light bar. They sent me the one with 4 lights. It's about 15 inches long. It also comes in a 3-light and a 2-light version. And it is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a light bar, but it's actually a cool light bar. And I can tell you right now, I'm going to recommend this thing. I'm actually kind of thrilled to have it. I have another one of these light bars that I've had for a while. I needed it in an emergency, and these are emergency lights, basically. You can use them for a whole bunch of things, but they are very, very bright. I mean, this would light up your whole van easily, and certainly light up, say, under your hood or underneath the van if you're working on it. And what's special about this one is that they put some thought into it, which my other one doesn't. My other one is like basically just a light. Figure it out. Here's your light. That's all we're doing. This one has 3 different ways to support itself. So it has 2 fairly strong magnets, so you can literally just grab it and stick it on your hood, and then you have light there. That's easy. It also has a hook right in the middle that you can hang it from anything, and it's balanced, which is nice. The hook is perfectly balanced, so no matter what you hang it from, the light will come down evenly. And you could actually weight one side or the other with the magnetic parts to kind of tilt it if you wanted to. But I like it, and it folds away and is out of the way, so that's a good thing. And it also, which I think is the best part, has a tripod mount. So you can put this thing on a tripod and point it wherever you want. And it's not just one mode of light. It has a whole bunch of LEDs in here. Geez, I can't even tell you how many. But they're not all the same color. There are white ones, yellow ones, red ones, and blue ones. And depending on how many times you press the button, you're going to get a different one. So the first press gives you a whole bunch of pure white light. That lights up maybe 2/3 of the LEDs. The second mode is warm light. So that kind of lower temperature light, and that lights up 1/3 of the LEDs. Third mode is both. So a mixed light, that's going to be your brightest light, and it's warm and cold. Like space or something. And then if you click it one more time, you get the really interesting mode, which is flashing red and blue lights. And, I'm like, well, this thing has magnets on it. I could turn this on and put it on the roof of my truck like some modern day Kojak light. And I could probably get into serious legal trouble doing that. I've had lights with this mode before. I'm not exactly sure what it's for. I mean, they claim it's an emergency mode, like if you're trying to attract attention. But I know people who would see these lights and go the opposite direction. So I'm not sure that is it. And the attention these could attract would be bad attention. Anyway, it has it. I don't know what you're going to do with the red and blue lights, but that's your problem. I would recommend just kind of clicking on past that part. It also has a couple of other just unnecessary but cool features. It has a gauge that tells you how much battery life is left in it, and it has a USB port for charging and for charging your phone, because it seems like all battery-powered devices today must be able to charge your phone. I know that my fancy fans, can also charge my phone. So you've got that too. And that's basically it. I've got the 4-light one. I think the 3-light one is probably all most people would need. But there's another difference between the 2, 3, and 4-light models, and that is how many batteries you get in them. So more lights means more battery power. So you're obviously going to get more battery power out of the ones that have more light. The 3-light version is like $23. I totally think it's worth it. I would buy this if they hadn't sent it to me, honestly. I just had to be made aware of it. I got to give negative stuff, right? Because that's how this works. So the only negative stuff I can find are, it's not rugged. Like if you drop this, it's probably going to break. So I could think you might not be a bad idea to put a couple of rubber bands around it to kind of create bumpers for it falling. I'm not sure that would help because it's probably going to hit a corner, and I think that would break it. So you have to be a little bit careful with it. The hook is a little loose. When I pulled on the hook, it popped right off. It's just a piece of wire, so I bent it out a bit more and added more strength to it, and now it seems fine. So just be aware of that. And it's not waterproof. Now, it does have a cover for the USB ports. That's a rubber cover, so that's going to help. So I wouldn't use it in the rain necessarily, but I also wouldn't worry about it too much if it got sprinkled on. I don't think the water's going to get in there and destroy anything. Some of the reviews say that the magnets aren't strong enough. I disagree. I think the magnets are pretty strong. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to stick it to. But it also comes with 4 basically magnet stickers. So if you have a place you want to put this regularly that is not metal, it's not magnetic, you can put these stickers up and stick it right to there. And I can think of a bunch of places to use that in a van. And it also comes with a USB charging cable, a big whoop. But honestly, I think this is a good thing to just kind of have with you, so you will have a lot of light wherever you need it, no matter what. The model I have is T03. 3 equals 4 lights, 2 equals 3 lights, and 1 equals 2 lights. A little confusing, but that is how they did it. Anyway, I like it. I'm glad the folks from LETOUR sent it to me. I can recommend this very easily because I think it's actually a pretty good product. So I have a link in the show notes. You can get the 3 and 4 light versions at the link on Amazon. I don't know where you can get the 2 light version, but given that the battery on the 2 light version is so much smaller, I think the 3 light version is probably the sweet spot. And as far as times, like how long is this thing going to run? Well, the working times they advertise are 2 hours, 4 hours, and 6 hours for the different numbers of lights. So for mine, it would be 6 hours for the 4 lights, 4 hours for the 3 lights, and 2 hours for the 2 lights. But that's the low estimate. The highs are 6, 8, and 10 hours. So obviously it depends on what mode you have it set in. But for me, 2 hours is enough. This is going to be an emergency light. I probably am not going to be using that for more than 2 hours. And if I am, I'll just plug it in. It's not the end of the world. Takes a little bit of time to charge. It's not a fast charger. So the one I have takes 5 hours to charge fully. The 3-light version takes 3 hours, and the mythical 2-light version is 1.5 hours. So that's it. It is the LETOUR LED light. good for emergencies, and maybe even good for folks who are doing a no-build, because I guarantee you this thing is bright enough to light up anything you want to light up. A place to visit. Sadly, there are a lot of these places lately. I'm sure most of you have noticed that the world is on fire, not necessarily politically, but also literally. I know that breathing in Chicago has been more of a challenge than it usually is, and we did not have it the worst. I have a friend in Ely, Minnesota. Wow. If you ever wanted to live in a campfire, Ely would probably have been the place last week, and yeah, it's been tough. So, what does this all mean? Oh, no, the forests are burning. Well, forests burn regularly. In the plains burn regularly too. Fire is part of nature, and the fact that we're living here now has kind of messed things up. We're living in places that are meant to burn every so often, and that's a big conflict. And what's happening this year, from the best I understand, I'm not an expert on this stuff, is that there is a lot of dead trees up in northwestern Canada from climate change. And it's not that climate change is killing the trees directly, it's that climate change is allowing infesting beetles to go farther north than before, and they're killing trees, and those trees are just standing there waiting to burn, which, again, is normal. Some trees, like the pinyon pine, have to burn in order to have seeds germinate. So that is completely normal. What's not normal is that there's so much dead wood right now, and that it's burning massive amounts and filling the clouds with smoke. And what also is not normal are these heat domes we're getting that are keeping the smoke in place. And that was the situation in Chicago. What does this have to do with a place to visit? All these burned places are interesting places to visit. And I say this because I've experienced it. The first time I went to Yellowstone National Park was about 2 years after they had massive wildfires, which dates it, right? Yeah, sadly, it doesn't date it because it's happened many times, but this was around 1990. And it was beautiful. So it was burnt. We could see that it was burnt. The trees were burnt. You could see evidence of burn everywhere. And the people we were with had been there a few years before, and they just, oh, look what happened. It was so beautiful here, and so on and so on. And that's what they were seeing. They were seeing this beautiful place that had been ruined. I was seeing this beautiful place because I didn't have a frame of reference. And what I saw was incredible new growth, lots of wildflowers, just really interesting stuff coming up through all the burnt soil and even the burnt trees, which were still alive, which was interesting in and of itself. The trunk's all burnt, but the tree's doing just fine. And so what I'm suggesting for you as a place to visit here is, if you get the chance, go drive through one of these burned out areas. Do it safely, follow local guidelines, etc. But do that, and then come back in a few years and see how that landscape has recovered and changed. We sometimes as humans, we have this idea that this is how things should always be here, and we're going to always try to keep them that way. That's kind of an environmentalist point of view, which is that this land is perfect the way it is. It has always been this way, and it always should be this way. But it's just simply not true. It hasn't always been this way, and it never will be that way again. I take much more of a conservationist perspective, which is that we, the humans, are the stewards of all of nature, only because we're the only ones who can be. And we're altering it enough that we kind of should take responsibility. So stuff is going to change. And it's interesting to see that change in a relatively short amount of time. And that's the opportunity we have with all this burnt area. So just something to think about. If you have a chance to drive through one of these burned areas, drive through, take some pictures from places that you can get back to, and then drive through again in a few years and look at the difference. I'm not saying the fires are good or bad. I'm just saying that they exist. They're part of nature, and so is renewal. Tales from the road. So it just occurred to me that one of the main reasons I started doing van life was the fact that I had to sleep in a tire warehouse. When I first started volunteering for Team Rubicon, I flew down to Houston during Hurricane Harvey, and they had us sleep in a building that was a tire warehouse. So it's in Houston, and it's a big tire warehouse, and then on top of the warehouse, like maybe 4 stories up, there's an office area with a whole bunch of cubicles and stuff that was empty, and that's where we were staying. But the smell of the tires came up through the floor. And we didn't have cots or anything, at least not most of the time. And I found myself sleeping under an office cubicle desk with the smell of rubber just coming up through the floor. And it was fairly horrible. And there were no showers. We're trying to clean up in like the office restroom. And, you know, I was very happy to be there. I had a great time. I met amazing people. I have no complaints about that. But the sleeping experience was terrible. And I was getting more and more and more sleep deprived. And I remember at one point I was asked to help figure out a problem with a spreadsheet. And I just couldn't think. I literally was like, why can't I think? I'm like trying to engage my brain and it won't get out of neutral. So I tried to make my sleeping environment more comfortable on future deployments, and I started actually traveling with my own tent, a one-man tent that would pop itself up, and that way I could at least have some control over what was going on around me, wherever we slept, whatever gymnasium or church floor it was, whatever. Often I would just set up outside wherever he was, because that's where it was cooler. And then a friend of mine brought his little camper down. It was a Bigfoot camper, but it was a trailer. Think of a Chinook, but designed more like a Terry trailer, you know, kind of very square, aluminum sides, not fiberglass. Little tiny thing. And I was like, ooh, why don't I have one of those? And this led on and on and on and on. And eventually, yeah, that's why we're here today. It's because I was sleeping in a tire warehouse. I'm talking to you right now on this podcast. And I just had that thought. That's a really interesting path there. There's something about adversity that makes you never want to experience that adversity again. So, for example, if you've ever run out of food, in the future you're always going to have extra food. Or if you've ever run out of water, you're always going to have extra water, etc. And for me, what I ran out of was a comfortable place to sleep. And ever since that, I've been trying to improve on that. And it started with my smart car, which is what I was driving at the time. I then got a trailer for the smart car, and I then got the NV200, and then I got the Sprinter, and you can see the progression. I was trying to make things better and better and better. And now my perspective has changed a bit, and what I want is simplicity and portability, and this pod is perfect. I'm still waiting for the amount of time in my life to actually finish the thing, but that's another story. So anyway, there's no lessons to learn from this story other than there's a reason you want to do van life, and sometimes it's not, boy, that looks like fun. Sometimes it's like, boy, that would have really come in handy when I needed it. And I'm much more in that. I mean, I still have fun with van life. I'm not ever going to put that aside. But I think my genesis of this was much more, boy, I really needed this, and I didn't have it. And now I want that to never be the case again. So I'm actually trying to build a survival pod, tip of the hat to Kira, for whatever experiences I might face in any of the projects I want to do. And right now, my number one project is writing, and so I'm building a little writer's pod so I can write wherever I am. Well, folks, thank you very much for listening to episode 302. Music, as always, is by Simon Wag. And if you need to get a hold of me for any reason, I am jeff@builttogo.com. That's 2 T's, not 3, not 1. And until next time, remember this quote from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It's actually from The Fellowship of the Ring. From the ashes of fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring.